To understand the setting of the book, The Sign of the Beaver, let's take a look at this map. Here we are in San Diego, in the far southwest corner of the United States, very close to the border of Mexico, the country that lies just south of us. Our story takes place in the far northeast corner of the United States, in the territory that became the state of Maine, very close to the border of Canada, the country that lies just north of us. Let's look at these two maps to get a better understanding of where our story takes place. In the smaller map, we're looking at the east coast of the United States, and here's Maine up here in the upper right corner. Here's a slightly larger map of the state of Maine. Get an idea of what it looks like. And in the story, we'll learn that Matt's family comes from Massachusetts. You'll recall that many of the original settlers of our country, including the Pilgrims, originally came to Massachusetts, to an area located right around here. Over 100 years has passed since the original settlements in Massachusetts, and Matt's family is moving out to a new frontier, a place never settled by white men, a place where the Penobscot Indians lived. Let's compare our modern map of the state of Maine to a map of the Native American tribes of the area. You can see the Penobscot lived in the central to eastern portion of Maine. Let's look at a timeline to help us position the setting of our story. When reading historical fiction, it helps to think about familiar events. You recall that the Pilgrims arrived at Plymouth Rock, Massachusetts in 1620. You have read about their struggles that first winter and in those early years. So that's a familiar event to you. Our story takes place in 1769, 149 years later. A lot has happened in those 149 years, including the French and Indian Wars. In the French and Indian Wars, the French and the British fought over land in the New World, primarily in the areas around Maine and adjoining Canada. The French were outnumbered by the British, so they relied on help from the many alliances they had with various Native American tribes. In the end, the British gained most of the French territory. You can see that our story takes place not long after the end of the French and Indian Wars. Our story is fiction, but it's historical fiction, based on a true story that the author had heard about. The last year in our timeline is 1776, the year the Revolutionary War began. This should be another very familiar event. This war was fought to gain our independence from Great Britain. At the end of the Revolutionary War, we were an independent nation. You can see that the setting of our book is just 7 years before the beginning of the Revolutionary War. Whenever you read a book or story, think of important events and dates you know to help you understand the setting. How do you think living in this period after the French and Indian War, but before the Revolutionary War, affected the characters in the story? Consider this as you read.